Cybersecurity used to be so difficult to get into. Now in this video, I'm going to explain to you how the cybersecurity industry has evolutionized so that you right now, even with somebody with no technical experience, can get into cybersecurity right now. Now for the ones new to my channel, my name is Julian Beschler and I'm currently one of the cybersecurity consultants at a Big Four, and I will basically describe to you the history of cybersecurity and why it is a golden opportunity for you to hop into it right now. I want you to understand that when it comes to the evolution of cybersecurity, a lot of people think, oh, cybersecurity is about programming, hacking, it's about, network configurations, it's about setting firewall rules. Now, while that, those items still exist in today's world, cybersecurity has transformed completely. Now, in the early days of cybersecurity, let's call it early, cybersecurity used to be about the following: networking, operating systems, OS, programming, and infrastructure. Now back then, cybersecurity was quite immature, and that mainly was because there was not a lot of huge technological advancement. So a lot of the early days of cybersecurity often revolved around these four pillars, right? And the reason was on why it was very difficult for professionals to get into cybersecurity back then was because early cybersecurity professionals had to have extensive knowledge in networking, operating systems, programming, and infrastructure, especially because AI didn't exist back then. In order for networks to be configured, you literally had to have a network admin who would manually configure the networks. Now, I have absolutely no clue about networks, so don't ask me, but back then, during the cybersecurity days, any issues regarding to network had to be manually configured. You had to have somebody at the switches. You needed someone to, open an OS and basically configure the networks. Like back then, a lot of these four things were heavily specialized in the sense that they had to have a lot of extensive knowledge, right? Now, cybersecurity in today's world, say now. Now became completely different. We have SOC, we have IAM, we have cloud, we have pen test, we have GRC, we have risk, we have compliance, we have privacy, and incidents response. You can see it, response. Now these are not limited, so these are there's definitely much more out there, but these are perhaps the most popular one. And now the reason is because technology nowadays literally became more complicated, right? Companies moved to cloud, and then there are SaaS, software solutions, and then we have mobiles, iPads, all of these different types of devices. Then e-commerce came by. Oh my god, e-commerce. Then there's digital banking, online banking, and then other, let's say, social factors such as remote work, or people just basically doing work from home. So a lot of those factors basically resulted into the specialization of those fields, right? So I want you to imagine that these are basically the grandfather pillars, right? These four, right? These are basically the grandfather pillars of cybersecurity. And over time, because of all these factors I just mentioned, cybersecurity became specialized and heavily specialized. In fact, specialized in the sense that almost in most of the big organizations, some of these fields literally have their own teams and their department. Back then, all the IT guys would sit in networking. Like you would literally have a granular team, right, who are, have a lot of overlapping skills, but you would basically group them together according to these 4 pillars. Nowadays, each person can literally have their own specialization, right? So, cybersecurity right now in today's world is technical versus non-technical. Now this is an important thing for you to understand because cybersecurity back then was heavily technical. Heavily technical, especially networking, operating system, as well as programming. Most of it, if not all of it, was very heavy technical, and hence why the specialists or the so-called cybersecurity guys back then, they had to be very good at what they did because a lot of them had to be technical. They had to learn the programming languages, they had to understand how the operating systems work inside out, and there was just extensive understanding of their specific domains. Now in today's world, because of a lot of the specialization, a lot of organizations began to implement information system solutions as well as architecture very early, right? And the issue is that compliance, sorry for my flash guys, that compliance and frameworks couldn't really keep up, right? Everybody got excited about, I don't know, cloud and all these applications and then the internet and then the software as a service. Because it happened very quickly, a lot of the compliances and the frameworks and regulations that surrounded those, so-called applications, as an example, were essentially outdated, right? And because the internet moves super fast, the cybersecurity industry had an issue. They had to fill the gap regarding the compliance. Hence why their teams of risk, compliance, privacy, GRC, as well as IAM basically filled those gaps, right? These were specialized roles meant to basically tackle the agility and the speed of these cybersecurity industries, right? And those factors, unfortunately, are factors that we cannot confirm, right? Or have no control over, right? I think that's a much better word. And so, understand that one of the biggest evolutions as a result of these factors were 2 things, right? Let me just erase this for you guys. 2 main things, okay? Back then, just imagine this as a data center. Back then, a lot of the active domains, or so-called the architecture of an organization's information systems, were very often on-prem. That was back then, okay? Let's say, and by back then, I mean like 20 to 30 years ago. And what happened was that organizations decide to basically transform and put a lot of their information onto the cloud, right? Onto the cloud, right? And examples of cloud is, AWS. From Microsoft, we have Entra-ID. They're all different types of so-called clouds out there. And what cloud basically allowed us to do was to cut cost, minimize admin work, and ultimately made it more convenient. Let's just put it efficient. Now, because of those factors, a lot of the organizations basically shifted a lot of their information system infrastructure and their architects into the cloud. Now, while the idea is superb, right, as we can see from all of these benefits, a lot of issue that surrounds the idea of transforming into a cloud is regarding identity access management. And the reason is because when you shift your information and your data onto the cloud, you're utilizing different types of channels, applications, and platforms. And now because of privileged access, right, the idea of a person, let's say you're the boss, this is you, and obviously the boss has more rights than you do, right? The boss can access finance documents, it can access database storages, it can access client information, it can access confidential files. The boss has essentially elevated access, right? However, you, let's say as a regular employee, has minimal access, right? And the reason why you have minimal access is because obviously you're an employee, right? So as a new employee, or just as a general employee, why would you want to access the financial statements? Why would you want to access confidential files? And for those reasons, the idea of elevated access came into place. And the problem was when a lot of the information shifted to the cloud, there was no proper or formal way to manage the so-called access rights, right? And hence why the birth of identity access management came into play. And it's mainly because you needed a system to essentially delegate and manage the access to specific resources and applications. Now the examples are not only documents or files, but also access to applications, to resources, to all different sorts of stuff when it comes to, you know, your IT, right? File service, etc., etc. And so those were the two challenges, right? The first challenge was actually transforming all of the data into the cloud, right? And so that's where the birth of cloud jobs existed, right? For example, AWS, where AWS has architect, there's engineer, there's associates, I believe. There's all different types of cloud specialists, mainly to fundamentally assist organizations with merging and transferring their data into the cloud. And also, by the way, the same way back, but that's perhaps for a different story. So it's basically asynchronization, right? But I'll do perhaps a separate video for this. And so cloud was the birth, the first like specialization in cybersecurity in terms of this. And then we had IAM. IAM is much more newer, but when it comes to IAM, we have, I'm not sure if you can see this, privileged access management, basically similar to the elevated access concept. Privileged access management, also known as PAM. Then we had specific key management solutions, and other areas of, let's say, just IAM components, right? And so nowadays, cybersecurity, specifically in terms of IAM, literally exists on a field alone, right? You can hire cloud engineers who are just specialized in cloud. You can hire IAM engineers who are just specialized on identity access management. Now, those were two examples, and those were two very simple, I would say, concepts of modern cybersecurity broken down. I hope you guys understood this. It was, from a high level, quite complicated to put it in simple terms for you guys. But if you did enjoy it, do like my video, do subscribe. If there are specific areas you want me to further go into or talk about, do let me know. Otherwise, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in the next one.